We just broke another renewable energy record again. For the third week in a row, global solar installations, they hit another all-time high. Wind power exceeded coal generation. Your battery storage deployments doubled year over year. And at this point, renewable energy breaks another record. It's like saying the sun rose this morning. We've become numb to it. And yet, there's still people who look at this 10, 15-year-old industry and say, see, we're not at 100% renewables yet, so obviously the technology won't work. Listen, if you want to go from soul-crushing corporate work to a career that actually matters and pays well, stick around to learn how you can become part of this $4 trillion a year, that's trillion with a T, electrify everything and power it with renewable energy industry. Today, I'm going to show you why humans are spectacularly bad at recognizing exponential change while living through it. Why 15 years feels both like forever and not nearly long enough. And why the people betting against this transition are standing exactly where horse farmers stood in 1920. So let's start with something that should blow your mind. Renewable energy has broken a major record almost every single month for the past 2 years. 2024, in review. Global solar capacity additions, 444 gigawatts. That is more than the entire installed solar capacity worldwide just 7 years ago. US solar installations, 32 gigawatts, a record. We're adding the equivalent of a large nuclear power plant worth of solar every single week. Global wind installations, 117 gigawatts. Grid scale battery installations grew 130% year over year. Battery costs dropped another 15%, on top of the 90% drop since 2010. Global EV sales, 17 million. Clean energy investment, 1.8 trillion with a T dollars in 2024. That is more than double what fossil fuel investment is getting. Let me put this in perspective. The entire renewable energy industry is basically 15 years old as a serious commercial sector. So let's go back to 2010. The iPhone 4 had just come out. Instagram just launched. Uber was this 1-year-old little startup. Tesla had sold about 1,000 cars total. Most people were still watching TV on cable. Your entire life runs on technologies that went from niche to dominant in 15 years. And somehow we're supposed to be disappointed that renewable energy, which requires rebuilding the entire global energy infrastructure, isn't at 100% yet. Every single metric is moving in one direction. Solar costs down 90% in 15 years. Wind costs down 70%. Battery costs down 90%. Deployment rates up 500%. Global capacity up 1,000% plus. These are not incremental improvements. These are exponential curves in the explosive growth phase. You know what happened? We broke so many records so consistently for so long that people are tuning them out. Constant exponential improvement becomes invisible. But here's what you need to understand. Most industries, they mature and plateau. Cost curves flatten. Innovation slows. Renewable energy? Oh, it is still an explosive growth phase after 15 years. That tells you something fundamental about the economics and the physics of this technology. When something keeps getting cheaper, better, and faster for 15 years straight, with no signs of slowing, that is not a fad. That is a permanent shift in the technological landscape. Now, let's talk about the dumbest criticism of the success. Yeah, but we're not running the grid on 100% renewables yet. So it proves that it doesn't work. 1920. Automobiles have been around for 20 years. Farmers in Iowa, yeah, they're still breeding and selling horses. Someone suggest tractors. The response captured in this classic newspaper clip. Wow, if cars really worked, everyone would have one by now. Most farms still use horses. Obviously, cars are a fad for rich city people. By 1950, wow, that farmer's kids, I bet they weren't breeding horses anymore. The transition happened not because someone flipped a switch, but because the economics become undeniable. But in 1920, you couldn't prove it. If you judged the automobile revolution by its halfway point, you'd conclude it wasn't going to work. That's not how transitions work. They happen exponentially. And humans, we are spectacularly bad at recognizing exponential change. Mobile phones. In 2000, 12% of the world had mobile phones. Remember the Nokia? 2010, over 50%. 2020, over 80% of the global population had a cellular phone. Someone in 2005 could have said most people don't have smartphones yet, so clearly they are not going to take over. This is exactly what's happening with renewable energy. 2010, renewables were 3 to 4% of global electricity. 2024, we are over 30% and accelerating. California, Scotland, Denmark, they're already hitting 50 to 70% of their grid using renewables. The S-curve is vertical. We're in the explosive growth phase. Linear thinking says, wow, we're at 30% after 15 years. So it'll take another 30 years to hit 60%. Exponential reality says we went from 3% to 30% in 15 years. The next jump to 70% might take 7 years because deployment is accelerating so fast. And here's why the critics are particularly wrong. They're judging a 15-year-old industry against a 150-year-old incumbent that had over a century of infrastructure buildup, government support, and monopoly protection. Fossil fuel infrastructure took decades to build. It required massive government investment and subsidies that continue today. Renewable energy is rebuilding that entire system in a fraction of the time, often fighting hostile regulations, and it's still winning economically. The fact that we're at 30% after just 15 years isn't evidence of failure. It is evidence of the fastest energy transition in human history. Oil and gas and the traditional utility model, it has a 150-year head start. And that head start, back in 150 years ago, back 100 years ago, back 50 years ago, yeah, you could essentially build anything, anywhere. Fill in that wetland, no problem. What's an environmental review? But nowadays, getting anything built everywhere needs review by lots of stakeholders, often with lagging rules and regulations to keep up with the new technology. I once went on this site visit back in the early days of solar plus residential battery storage. The fire chief required us to meet him out at his home before signing off on the permit. Into the basement we went, where we zigzagged through stacks of firewood, snuck past the oil tank, stepping over the lawnmower with the gas can with no cap, unless you count that old rag stuffed in the spout. All this legacy equipment and technology that we're used to. The explosion risk and the BTUs contained in firewood, gasoline, and heating oil are exponential to what our little 5 kW battery contained. But that battery, it was novel. And to the fire chief, that was scary. If we were installing solar, wind, and batteries in the same era as we built out the grid 1.0, wow, we'd probably already be running on 100% renewable. I know. It's a little bit like saying if Michael Jordan played in today's NBA, he'd average 100 points a game. Moving on. Let's dig into why humans cannot see this transition even when it's happening right in front of us. The first frost problem is what I call this. So every year here in New England, the first frost, it always catches you off guard. You walk outside, your car is covered in frost, and you think, I don't even know where my scraper is. Why didn't I prepare? You knew winter was coming, and yet the first frost always catches you unprepared. Why? Because humans live in the present. We adapt to current conditions and assume in our subconscious they're going to continue until something forces us to change. This is exactly what is happening with the energy transition. Our 1920 farmer looks around and sees horses everywhere. Cars are rare and they're expensive, roads are terrible, gas stations barely exist. From his 1920 vantage point, horses are obviously superior. So they keep breeding horses. By 1925, still very, very confident. By 1930, well, half his neighbors have tractors. By 1940, it is over. The point isn't that he was dumb. The point is that humans struggle to see transformations that make their current reality obsolete, especially when those transformations happen gradually and then suddenly. Neil deGrasse Tyson and Charles Liu had this great podcast episode where they talk about how humans cannot predict beyond 20 or 30 years because we extrapolate linearly from current conditions. In 1980, people predicted that by 2010 we'd have flying cars and moon bases. They didn't predict smartphones, social media, or on-demand everything. Why? Because they were extrapolating from 1980s technology. They imagined the same stuff, just better. This is what's happening in energy now. People imagine 2040 by extrapolating from today. Power plants, but cleaner. Cars, but electric. The grid, but more renewables. What they're not imagining, but what is already being built. We're talking about virtual power plants with millions of distributed batteries. Building integrated solar on every surface. AI optimized microgrids. Vehicle to grid where your car powers your house. Sustainable aviation fuel from captured CO2. These aren't science fiction. These are commercial technologies being deployed right now. Which ones are you going to help develop? Humans can barely predict 30 years ahead, but that doesn't mean the future is unpredictable. It means that we use the wrong mental models. The renewable transition isn't failing because we're not at 100% yet. It's succeeding so fast that we've become numb to the constant record-breaking growth. Now, let me show you how this transition is actually playing out a very predictable pattern. Phase 1, we gotta prove that it works. Enter the islands. The transition started with small island nations with expensive imported fossil fuels. Costa Rica, 98 to 99% renewable electricity. Not ideology, economics. Importing diesel by ship is insanely expensive. Others followed. Iceland, 100%. Scotland, 97%. Denmark, regularly over 100% of demand from wind. Critics say, sure. But James, those are tiny systems. That won't scale. Phase 2, prove it scales. Enter Texas and California, two of the largest electricity markets in the world. Texas, wow, that should not work, according to the critics. It is an oil and gas state, conservative politics, independent grid, and yet leads the nation in wind power with over 40 gigawatts. Solar is exploding with over 10 gigawatts per year installed. Wind and solar regularly provide 40 to 50% of Texas's electricity. California regularly runs on 100% renewable electricity during the middle of the day. They have 60 gigawatts of solar and wind. They have 10 gigawatts of battery storage. The predicted rolling blackouts never happened. Critics said, sure, but those are special cases. They will not work everywhere. Wow. Phase 3, major industrial nations, and that is what's happening now. The UK ran its entire national grid on renewables for multiple hours in 2024 repeatedly. Coal went from 40% of the electricity mix in 2012 to being completely eliminated by 2024. Offshore wind now provides 25 to 30% of their electricity. The UK, birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, built on coal, no longer burns coal for electricity at all. Germany, 60% renewable electricity. Spain, 55% renewable electricity. Enter Australia, the knockout punch. Australia should be the least likely to go renewable. They have massive coal reserves. They have enormous natural gas reserves. They are a major coal exporter. They have conservative politics, and they have a mining-dependent economy. But what actually is happening? Well, if you look at the summer of 2023-2024, the grid was collapsing under heat waves. Fossil fuel plants were failing. Batteries and solar rescued the grid. Coal plants were literally melting down. Australians saw fossil fuel failure and renewable success simultaneously. The result, Australia is now on pace for 82% renewable electricity by 2030, installing solar and batteries faster per capita than anywhere else. Coal plants, they are closing well ahead of schedule, not because of regulations, but because of economic competition. If Australia, coal-rich, mine-dependent Australia, is going all in on renewables, well, what's your local utility's excuse? So here's the pattern. Islands proved it worked, big states prove it scales, industrial nations proved it powers complex economies, fossil fuel exporters proved it's cheaper even with cheap fossil fuels. Next phase, your grid, your city, your state. The dominoes are falling predictably. The critics keep moving the goalposts. Won't work on islands. Well, it worked. Oh, well, it won't scale. It's scaled. Won't work in industry. It's working. Won't work with cheap fossil fuels. Australia just proved it does. We won't work everywhere all the time. Give us 5 more years. Before we wrap up, go ahead in the comments. Go ahead, write it. What about nuclear? Nuclear is the real solution. Listen, if it's carbon free, I'm all for it. I'm not an anti-nuclear guy, but let's talk about why nuclear is always about 5 years away and has been for 50 years. Take this Bloomberg report. They just reported that Bechtel predicting 10 new U.S. reactors. Yeah, 5 years. 5 years, we'll have 10 new reactors. We've heard this story for decades. 2005, here comes a nuclear renaissance. The result, you had Vogtle 3 and 4. $14 billion budget. Took them 15 years and a $30 billion price tag. 2010, wow, here comes small modular reactors. They is gonna revolutionize everything. Results? We're still waiting. Still not a single commercial SMR in the US. 2020, next generation reactors by 2028. Result? Timelines are slipping, costs are rising. 2025, 10 new reactors in just 5 more years. Prediction? Late and over budget, like every nuclear project for the last 40 years. The fundamental problems: nuclear timelines, planning and permitting, 5 to 10 years. Construction, 7 to 15 years. Total, it's going to take you 12, minimum of 12 if you cut that red tape. 12 years. More likely, 25 years. Costs, 10 to 30 billion per gigawatt. Now, compare this to solar and battery. Planning, 6 to 12 months. Construction, 3 to 12 months. Total, 1 to 2 years. Costs, 1 to 2 billion per gigawatt equivalent. So while you wait for 15 years for one nuclear plant, you could build 50 gigawatts of solar and storage. Nuclear is so expensive and so unpredictable that no single company wants to take on that risk. That's not confidence. That's admission of terrible project economics. Compare this to renewables. Private companies are building billion-dollar solar and wind projects without government risk sharing. Pure private capital is financing battery storage projects. The market is voting $650 billion renewable investment versus $60 billion in nuclear investment in 2024. My challenge to nuclear advocates: show me one operating reactor that was delivered on time, on budget, and is generating cheaper electricity than solar and storage. I've been hearing nuclear is 5 years away my entire career. We're still waiting. Meanwhile, solar will continue to break records monthly. Batteries will continue to drop 15% year over year. Australia went from grid failure to renewable success in under 3 years. We can't wait for nuclear to arrive, maybe by 2035, when we need to be decarbonized by 2035. Build with the technologies that work now and deploys fast. That's renewables and storage. Everything I just described isn't just interesting data, it is a roadmap for your career. When you see a technological transition this clearly, you have an opportunity that most people miss. Take the horse farmer versus the mechanic in 1920. Horse farmer sees horses everywhere, doubles down on horses, starts growing hay. Mechanic sees automobile sales growing 40% annually, prices dropping, infrastructure being built, becomes an auto mechanic. Person A, the farmer, spends 10 years watching their business die. Person B, the mechanic, spends 10 years becoming increasingly valuable, opening up mechanic shops, gas stations, all along the highway. Same market, same information, different choices, dramatically different outcomes. The 2025 version. Path A, stay in corporate job, optimizing spreadsheets, watch the transition happen from your Google News account. Path B, position yourself in an industry that is growing 20 to 40% per year with absolutely no sign of slowing. Specific opportunities: heat pumps, solar, batteries, energy system designers, commercial solar sales, renewable project managers. These aren't just future jobs, these are current openings companies are struggling to fill. So take advantage of the early mover advantage. Right now, renewable energy is like the internet in 1998 or the smartphone in 2009. Get in now. Limited competition. You get to build expertise during the acceleration. In 5 years, you'll be senior staff. In 10 years, you're an industry veteran. Wait 5 years. Obvious opportunities will be filled, competing with experienced professionals. Wait 10 years, now you're competing in a mature industry with no early mover advantage. The window is now. 15 years in, the debate is over. The data won. The transition, it's happening. The only question is, are you building it or are you watching it happen? 3 years from now, you'll either profit from the biggest infrastructure build out in history, or you'll still be in your corporate job wondering when the recession hits. The farmer kept selling hay for horses until 1935. By then, it was too late to pivot. Don't be that farmer. Book a free 30-minute call. Link is going to be in the show notes, and I'll map out the opportunities right in your region for you and your skills. Talk about which ones translate and the realistic salary progression. Or message me on Instagram at SolarPunkPro for the 100 careers that will power the future guide. The renewable transition isn't a maybe. it is inevitable, friends. It's accelerating, and it's creating the best career opportunities of our generation. I'm James Manzer. Remember, we're here for a good time, not a long time, so you might as well build infrastructure of the future instead of maintaining the past. Don't be that farmer. Go ahead, get plugged in.